This is James Randi, and you're listening to The Skeptic Zone.
Welcome to The Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 619 for the 23rd of August 2020. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia, where the winter winds have come. It's quite cool outside, crisp and cool, sunny, and there is lots of snow in the mountains to the west of Sydney. People are running up, driving up, doing whatever they can to enjoy a winter wonderland. Coming up on this week's show, I speak to my old friend Beth Darlington from Access Paranormal. Beth is in the UK at the moment, and she goes around, well, so-called haunted locations, trying to find out what really is going bump in the night. And I think you'll find that Beth has a pretty good attitude to these investigations. Following that, it's Michelle Bickersma from Melbourne. Hello, Michelle, down there in the lockdown in Melbourne. And Michelle will be looking at the anecdotal evidence fallacy. I think this one comes up a lot, and we hear this one a lot. Then we have the interesting case, and a bit of history, I must say. Now, I hope you've listened to the Skeptic Zone radio adventure, Solar Flare. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page at skepticzone.tv, you can see a link and listen to Solar Flare. We did this some years ago. It was a lot of fun. Wow. Recently discovered future audio from NASA, if I can put it that way. It turns out there was an original Solar Flare, an Australian spaceship. The Solar Flare, the original one that was, well, it was sort of on its way to the moon. We're going to discover more a little bit later on in the show. Then we have a roundup of some of the latest COVID-19 foolishness to be found in real life and on the interwebs. And it's also a reminder that you still have some time to nominate someone or something, some organisation, for the Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award. Then to round off the show, it's Let's Have a Random Rant with our reporter Dr. Paulie, who's very busy at the moment, very busy, being one of the organisers for the upcoming Skepticon 2020, the Australian Skeptics National Convention, and there will be a new promo in this week's show. Anyway, Dr. Paulie looks at a study about fighting COVID-19 misinformation on social media, and then she interviews Professor Tammy Hoffman from the Institute of Evidence-Based Healthcare at Bond University about critical thinking in schools. Now, if you're a teacher or you know a teacher, this should be a very interesting interview for you. Stay tuned at the end of the show for an announcement about our new reporter. And if you listen carefully, you'll actually hear our new reporter during the show at some stage. But now it's time for me to run downstairs. Yes, Susan Gerbeck, I will look carefully to make sure I don't trip over those Skeptic Zone cats. And I think this week I might have a little cup of instant chicken soup. Something like that, with a bit of toast. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Joining me now on the line, all the way from London in the UK, and believe it or not, folks, I kid you not, we are actually doing this, the base hookup via the telephone line. Remember those? It's Beth Darlington. Hello, Beth.
Oh, Richard, so good to speak with you.
Yes, it's been a long time since we've seen each other. We had a wonderful day about 2 years back. You and I and Maynard went down to Circular Quay here in Sydney in the times before when you really could get around. And you and I faced the camera and were very serious about psychic investigations. And Maynard walked by in a bedsheet.
It was so funny, and he did such a great job. We had such fun that morning. He was moving around, and the holes cut out from the sheets for his eyes. It looked great. It was such a great day. Really good morning.
Yeah, and I think that sums up your attitude to a lot of these things. Now, you are a paranormal investigator. You go out to ghosty places whenever you can, and right now you're in the UK doing that. What does that mean exactly? What do you do when you arrive? And I think it's fair to say you take it in the right spirits, pun intended. I think you have a really good time, but what's your goal and how do you go about it?
A lot more of a rational way of it. I mean, a lot of events are very similar here to what they are in Australia and also in the US as well. But it's a really lot more of an inquisitive sort of stance with it. Obviously, it's about actually investigating possible paranormal phenomena. So it's more of okay, something's occurred. Let's look at it a more rational way. I think they term it anomalistic psychology. Chris French is a big sort of pioneer of that. He's also based here in the UK as well. And it's really just looking at it from a more rational perspective. Okay, something's occurred. Let's look at it before we even entertain the possibility of it being paranormal. And I kind of really do take that angle. I know a couple of my friends who are investigators think it's probably not the best, and maybe it's good to be a little bit more neutral with that sort of approach. But I really do think it's best to approach it from it's probably not paranormal, but let's just have a look at it anyway, and then see what we can find.
Absolutely. And we had a wonderful time here when you did speak at Skepticon 2018 here in Sydney. And you were on a panel with myself as the host and a group of skeptics from around the world. And there you were, sort of out, the odd one out in a funny sort of way. And I believe that your friends in the paranormal side of things weren't really happy that you were there, or they were worried for you or something like that?
That's exactly right. I had a lot of concerned friends in the paranormal community that were thinking I was very, very brave to have got up on stage with such fantastic minds like Dr. Susan Blackmore and I think that's Kerry Poppy. That's exactly right. Lovely, lovely people, and they sort of were like, well, you might need a bulletproof vest going up there, and be careful. They might really sort of hammer you down a bit. But it obviously, as you know, I had the most amazing time. Very welcomed. It was such a great day, a real eye-opener, and just great exchanging mind ideas, thoughts, theories, and a lot of really good healthy skepticism does look at the paranormal not as this, of course it's pseudoscience, but it's not looked on with such hate, I guess you could say, or disdain. It's just more of a bit of a cheeky joke on the side, I guess you could say, compared to more serious sort of issues like the anti-vaxxer movement or something like that. So it's very, very different level of seriousness. So I think with that, it's a lot more of a lighter sort of side of the world's topics to sit there and pick about. So yeah, it was a great time. But yeah, I had very concerned people originally.
Well, it's one of the things I like about the skeptical movement. We can be serious, and we need to be serious from time to time, and you put your finger on it right there with the anti-vaxxers in particular. But we can have an awful lot of fun and interest and investigations and get out there and, go to a supposedly haunted house. But for you at the moment in the UK, it must be a little bit tricky, a little bit difficult to do your normal level of investigations.
It is. At the moment, where we've got 5 stages of lockdown. We're on stage 3. Stage 5 was the most extreme. I think we'll be in stage 3 for quite a while, and that basically means we can't gather in groups of any more than 30 people. And that obviously makes it very difficult for anyone who's running any event, let alone a paranormal investigation. Particularly at night, it's all this social distancing as well, so it's keeping a distance from people. Which is probably not a bad thing, I think, at the end of the day. It's probably some benefit to it. But it is quite difficult at the moment. I know there's quite a few venues here that are suffering from it, as you can imagine, with lots of other businesses for different reasons. So there are venues that would often have a lot of people going through in the evenings, on the weekends, particularly here. Now it's summer. It's the busiest time for this kind of stuff. And they're not able to have as many people go through. And, of course, the months prior to now, there was absolutely no events happening whatsoever until I think it was July. So it's hit it pretty hard in that sense. And also dealing with private cases or residential cases, there's been talk about people being indoors more. They're actually finding that there's more possible spooky happenings in their homes. I think it's probably just more the fact they're spending more time at home as opposed to actually being out. That's why I often find I get a lot more case inquiries in winter than I do in summer, because a lot more people are indoors as well. So I think that this is kind of almost supporting that idea that I have.
Now, you are involved in a group, or is it your group? I'm not exactly sure, called Access Paranormal. I like that because you wear the shirt, don't you? You wear the tank top and the shirt that says Access Paranormal.
That's right. That's exactly it. It is my website. And it's originally just was a website for paranormal investigators in Australia. But I'm really, really passionate about online learning for people who want to go out and do this, because being in Australia for so long, having access to such information was quite difficult. You had to, sort of fly over, or you had to try and dig around, and finding reliable information too. It can just be a little harder. You've got to really kind of dig about. So I thought, I'll create this website for the Australian paranormal community, and it's just sort of grown so much so it's more of an international website now, which is great.
And some years back, and sadly I couldn't make it at the time, when we used to have Skeptics in the pub, you came and gave a talk here for the Sydney Skeptics in the pub, and I believe that was about the paranormal and mental health. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Yes, certainly. The talk was about the similarities between people who feel they're experiencing something paranormal compared to somebody who may actually be having a mental health illness or a crisis at that time, and just the similarities of being aware of it. It's very much from an ethical perspective as well. So as an investigator, I think it's, particularly for possible paranormal phenomena, I think it's really important to have a good sound knowledge. Obviously, there are people that are experts who are also paranormal investigators in mental illness and mental health. But I think in a general population, I think every investigator should actually do a mental health first aid course, and be able to help someone who's having a mental health crisis, because that's the main reason, but also gives a really good sound knowledge of the different types of mental illnesses people can experience, and being aware of the fact that might actually cross over into what people may feel like having a paranormal experience. Of course, we don't diagnose or anything like that. It's not the case at all, but just having that awareness so okay, I think I might be above my ground to be able to take this case on. It needs to be referred to specialists instead, like in the medical industry.
I think it's a very good attitude to take, because from time to time in the skeptical community, we'll get people coming to us where for me, for example, in my completely uneducated opinion, they may be in need of more help or more guidance than I can possibly offer. But I guess you would get people from time to time contacting you via Access Paranormal who would have worries and concerns, maybe think they've got a haunted house, but maybe have deep problems.
Absolutely. And it does happen. There are key things, as you can imagine, that you get flagged as soon as they start speaking. Often I get emails, and I can sort of tell through the emails with a certain language used and the certain things that people have said, if there is actually something more that they need help with as opposed to something paranormal. It's like, let's put that aside for now. I think there may possibly be something else going on here. And you learn to step away from that. It's not a licensed job, there's no governing body, there's no official qualification. So it's all volunteer based as well. And so you've got to really, really, it's that ethical reasons for stepping back and saying this is above what I can do to help. This obviously needs another specialized help that's professional and in the medical field. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that is the correct attitude to take. Finally, Beth, I mean, in all the years you've been doing this and you've been running around ghosty houses and haunted locations and things like that, have you ever seen anything that went bump in the night that really had you scratching your head?
I did think I've seen an apparition. And I always say think because I had someone else see it with me as well. And we were in a lovely old pub near Goulburn area, just outside of Goulburn. And we were setting up, and we knew the place was all locked off. And there's a person. We're paranormal investigators. We all wear black, so everyone's wearing black. Everyone knows. So we look like nighttime, as you do. You got to be in your colour, right? And we looked across, and there was sometimes with people who do feature walls, they'll cut a section out and put glass instead. So it's not the full wall, but it's part of it. And somebody had walked past in a denim blue shirt and sandy blonde hair. And of course, there's nobody who was wearing that at the time. And so I thought, hang on, I thought we've got the whole place to ourselves. And so I went around the corner with my friend who saw. I thought, someone must have broke in. I went around the corner, realizing as I was walking around the corner, it's hard floors. I'm like, I can hear my feet walking on the floor. I didn't hear footsteps before. And obviously, as I went around the corner, that person was not there, and actually realized they would have actually been half into the ground as well. So it was very interesting. I don't know.
I was about to say, isn't that fun? And it reminds me of, the good old stuff, the stuff that I like, the UFOs and the monsters and the looking for ghosties and what was that sort of thing. It really takes me back. I think that's wonderful. Well, Beth Darlington, all the way over there in UK, good luck with your future investigations into ghosties and haunted places. And you know what? When this is all over, Beth, one day I'd love to come on a ghost hunt with you.
That would be fantastic. I would love to have you over here. There are so many different venues and old buildings worth exploring in the spooky parts at night time, so that would be great to have you over.
It would. I look forward to it. It would indeed. But for now, Beth Darlington, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Dr. Alice Howarth and Michael Marshall. Just two of the speakers for Skepticon 2020, the Australian Skeptics National Convention. Dr. Alice has a PhD in cellular and molecular pharmacology in the field of cancer cell biology and is currently a clinical and molecular pharmacologist working in nanomedicines at the University of Liverpool in the UK. As a vice president of the Merseyside Skeptic Society, Alice has gone undercover to investigate false cancer cures, flat earth beliefs, and more. Alice is the co-host of the long-running skeptical podcast, Skeptics with a K, a science communicator, and has written for The Guardian. Michael Marshall is the project director of the Good Thinking Society and president of the Merseyside Skeptic Society. He regularly speaks with proponents of pseudoscience for the Be Reasonable podcast. His work has seen him organizing international homeopathy protests, going undercover to expose psychics and quack medics, spending a weekend embedded in the Flat Earth movement, and co-founding the popular QED conference. His work with Good Thinking was partly responsible for the end of homeopathy funding on the UK's National Health Service, saving the country millions of pounds. He has written for The Guardian, The Times, New Scientist, New Statesman, and The Skeptic. Dr. Alice Howarth and Michael Marshall, just two of the speakers appearing at Skepticon 2020, the Australian Skeptics National Convention. For more information and to buy your tickets, visit www.skepticon.org.au.
Logical fallacies. What are logical fallacies, and why is it important that critical thinkers should know about them? A logical fallacy is an error we can make in reasoning, but it usually crops up when we are discussing or arguing our point of view. Some people might even knowingly use them to try and score cheap points in an argument due to intellectual laziness. They are traps we can fall into, but if we know what to look out for, we can spot them when they occur and stop ourselves from using them. This time, we'll look at the anecdotal evidence fallacy.
This is when you are swayed into taking up a position or belief based on isolated examples of data, poor data, or personal experience rather than reliable evidence.
This logical fallacy is surely one of the most common and can be seen in many different circumstances. It can come about from the intrinsic trust we have in the perceived wisdom of our friends and especially our family. After all, Mother knows best.
I hear the Vaxxed bus is touring the country. They make videos of parents and others telling their stories of vaccine damage. It seems then there must be something to the claims that vaccinations are unsafe.
Here we have a classic case of people being swayed by the anecdotal evidence fallacy. If vaccination was as dangerous as the anti-vaxxers would have us believe, that fact would be reflected in ongoing studies worldwide. But it can be compelling to see people pour their hearts out when they really do think vaccines have damaged their children.
People are so sceptical of acupuncture. I bet they haven't tried it for themselves. I was sceptical too until I tried it, and I can tell you that I know it works because it worked for me.
Skeptics have known for years that this sort of anecdotal evidence is almost impossible to counter. When someone, for whatever reason, is convinced that a treatment has worked for them, they will, and understandably so, stick to their guns no matter what. Alas, in this case, the scientific evidence for the claims of acupuncture are very much lacking.
They say the world is heating up and sea levels are rising. But my family has been running the same oyster farm on the river for generations. And you know what? We haven't noticed any change in the water levels at all.
This example is based on a real interview with an oyster farmer in Australia. Even though he might work on the river, that doesn't mean he, or his family going back years, have kept accurate details of water levels. However, to him, things seem more or less the same. Based on this, he is ready to deny climate change. It is often very convenient to rely on anecdotal evidence, and at some times it can seem intuitive. No matter how sure we are, we should never be afraid to check the basis of our opinions and beliefs to see if they are based on shaky ground. Knowing a logical fallacy when you hear one, and even knowing its name, is important when arguing your point of view. However, you may come across as arrogant and not get very far if you call it out by name to your opponent when you hear it being used. If your opponent calls you out for using one, it's time to stop and think about how you are making your case. Use your knowledge of logical fallacies wisely, and remember that even if your point of view is right and you know all the pitfalls in arguing your case, it doesn't always mean you'll win on the day. And as skeptics, we must also remember that we too can be wrong at times. I'm Michelle Bickersma from the Vic Skeptics. Thanks for listening.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's the press room here at NASA. This gives us a view of Mission Control. Up there on the giant screen, you'll see the mission status of the Solar Flare space capsule from the Australian Space Service, or ASS for short. This is a part of our ongoing international cooperation. As you can see, the Solar Flare is on track to land on the moon in a few hours. The pilot, Captain Richard Saunders, won his chance to fly to the moon in a national lottery held in Australia.
Mission Control to Solar Flare. Mission Control to Solar Flare. Come in, Solar Flare.
Solar Flare to Houston. Solar Flare to Houston. Captain Saunders here. How are you reading me, Houston?
Houston here, Flight Director Dunning. We have a worldwide hookup today, so hi from NASA to wherever you're hearing us. Now, your flight status is looking good, Solar Flare. Need you to check your O2 levels. We have them at 196.5.
Roger that, Houston. O2 levels are set.
We also have a message from the Australian Prime Minister. She wants you to bring back some moon aliens. She says they'll do a better job than her current cabinet.
Tell her I'll vote for her next time if she lowers my taxes. I have about 3 hours before beginning my descent onto the lunar surface. Very smooth ride so far. Didn't feel the lift off at all. Man, those rocket scientists you have really know their stuff. And the artificial gravity is working well.
Roger, Solar Flare. Yeah, that artificial gravity, huh?
Hey, Houston, I have to report that the stars look very different today.
How so, Solar Flare?
Hard to pin down, but they look like they've been drawn onto the background of space with a crayon.
Roger that. Solar Flare, you do know this is a public broadcast. We are going out live around the world. Okay, right. Understood.
Then, hi to my friends in Australia. Sorry I don't have a view of the Earth, but the reversing camera hasn't functioned since takeoff.
Now, Captain Saunders, we need you to start the special procedure in 2 hours.
Special procedure, Houston? Not sure I've been informed about that.
The special procedure? The one your Prime Minister briefed you on in Canberra before you left Australia.
Oh, right, the briefing. Yeah. I missed that one. Couldn't travel at the time owing to COVID-19. Is this special procedure important?
Stand by, Solar Flare. Hey, Ben, he says he wasn't briefed about the special procedure. Also, why does he think there's artificial gravity?
And why did he talk about the stars being painted on? I mean, I did the best I could.
Yeah, well, I think you could have done a better job. Use paint next time, huh?
I think they look pretty, but does Captain Saunders... No, he can't. I mean, does he think he's really in space?
I think he does. Oh, okay, man, you have the con. I have to attend to this.
Okay. Solar Flare, this is Houston. Mission Deputy Radford. Keep on your current trajectory and we'll update you soon.
Roger that, Houston.
To the Honourable Prime Minister of Australia, Parliament House, Canberra, Australia. Dear Prime Minister, I am writing to you about a tricky situation with the current moon mission, with your astronaut, Captain Saunders. It appears he is unaware of the special procedure, that is, of faking a lunar landing, and seems to be under the impression that he is really going to the moon. As you know, we here at NASA have spent a lot of time and money faking moon missions since the 1960s, after we discovered the moon, like the Earth, is flat. I know how important it is for Australia, not to mention your re-election chances, to seem to be in the forefront of space exploration, even if it's 60 years late, but we all might be in for a problem with Captain Saunders. I suggest we try the Capricorn 1 solution. We have a disused hangar over in Area 51, left vacant since the last ET escaped in 2016. I'm sure we can tell him the mission has been aborted and convince him he really returned to Australia if we give him enough Vegemite toast. Yours, etc., etc. P.S. Anytime your country wants to take back Ken Ham, be our guest.
Solar flare to Houston. Houston, we have a problem.
Roger, solar flare.
It seems that someone or something is outside the capsule, touching up the stars with a paintbrush. Please advise.
Ah, Radford!
G'day, this is Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki, proud to be a skeptic, and you can find out more about me at drkarl.com and get lots of free stuff there as well.
Now, as mentioned a couple of weeks ago on the show, or maybe a bit more, there are lots of contenders this year for the Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award. Awarded to the most preposterous piece of paranormal pseudoscientific piffle. You know, the sort of thing. In the past it's gone to people advocating water divining, various alternative medicine, anti-vaccination views. 1 year it went to a woman who said she could live on air alone, breatharianism, and you can spend a very enjoyable couple of hours going through the list of past winners of the Bent Spoon Award, stretching back almost 40 years. Owing to COVID-19, indeed, some of the previous winners are back again. And one we've mentioned before on the show, the man who always seems to go by the tag celebrity chef, Pete Evans. And this is a bit of a story that appeared in news.com.au. Pete Evans labelled hypocrite for COVID-19 safety measures in his Byron Bay healing clinic. And this is an article by Rebecca Skellen, published on the 19th of August. The TV chef, there we go, TV chef. The TV chef's new Byron healing clinic, and healing clinic is in quotes, appears to be adhering to social distancing, which has left many labelling the anti-vaxxer a hypocrite. And it says in part, he's been spouting bizarre and potentially dangerous claims about the virus on his social media channels, stating, quote, there is no pandemic, end quote. But now Pete Evans is being accused of being a hypocrite. And that's in quotes too. After photos of his new, quotes again, healing clinic, end quote, in Byron Bay, New South Wales, show the business is following COVID-19 safe practices, including having a hand sanitizer station. The clinic is yet to open its doors to clients, but preparation for those seeking Evans' quote, transformational practices, end quote, at Evolve Health Labs is well underway. While there are no suggestions that Evans is doing wrong by adhering to the government's social distancing measures, many have pointed out it goes against the statements the 47-year-old, why that's important, we should know his age, I don't know, but there you go, the 47-year-old has made doubting the coronavirus is even real. A tweet posted earlier today calls out the former TV chef, that forever, whatever else he does in his whole life, he'll always be called the TV chef. The former TV chef's new business venture, labelling Evans a hypocrite. Quote, Pete Evans says that hashtag COVID-19 and wearing masks is all bull. He wants you to march in the streets against conformity. But his new shop has distancing measures and sanitizer, and he wears masks? Sucks when your heroes are hypocrites, doesn't it? End quote. And that was a tweet from @CamLivesHere. And I'll be linking to this article in this week's show notes. It goes on to say, while the front of the clinic can't be seen in the snap, referring to a photograph on that page, a distinctive logo on the reception desk, where the sign is displayed, is visible and matches that featured on the clinic's Instagram page. Evolve Health Labs. As a result, others were quick to jump on board, accusing the anti-vaxxer turned conspiracy theorist of shunning his controversial views to make money. One person said he, quote, doesn't want to lose dollars, end quote, while another argued his bold statements about coronavirus were just for attention. And another snap on the page has a sign saying, help us keep everyone safe from COVID-19. Do not visit if you have, and it lists the various symptoms of coronavirus. Now, if you recall, Pete Evans has already been fined by the government for promoting a box of lights called a biocharger, costing only $14,990, that he claimed had healing properties for the Wuhan virus. And it says here he's been sharing countless conspiracy theory memes, one of which asks his 263,000 followers if COVID-19 was the, quote, biggest scam-demic in history, end quote. Now we look around a bit more, and another story in a similar vein that's come my way from also from news.com.au is about doctors slamming COVID-19 anti-vaxxers by Dr. Zach Turner. A Sydney doctor has spoken out saying anyone who refuses the COVID-19 vaccination should be banned from travelling interstate and overseas. And let's say that's assuming that a vaccine comes along, which works, which has yet to be seen. The story says, with news of vaccines reaching their final stages and our government signing a deal to buy 25 million doses, many of us are thinking with relief that it's all over. Unfortunately, it is not even close to halfway. To achieve herd immunity and completely eradicate the transmission of COVID-19, Australia would need about 80 to 95% of its population vaccinated, which in reality may take up until late next year. Now, on this page is a little vote, and it says, would you take a COVID-19 vaccine? ? Yes or no. Cast your vote. Well, what can we assume? Can we assume they're asking you, would you take a COVID-19 vaccine? Presumably it would work. So a COVID-19 vaccine that works, that is true, that is real, that is effective. Of course, it could be argued what this question is saying is, would you take a COVID-19 vaccine or something that's labelled as such or hopeful or whatever? Let's see what the results are so far. And if I press yes, assuming it's the real deal they're talking about, cast your vote. Then the page loads. Ooh, out of 98,441 voters, 31% say yes, 69% say no. And this reminds us that these sort of online votes are very unscientific and completely unreliable. But I wonder if the anti-vaxxers, or the flying monkeys as they're known, have swooped on this page to heavily vote no. Oh, it gets better. Don't worry, I'll link to this page. The next voting box down the page a little bit says, should the COVID-19 vaccine be mandatory? Well. Okay, why not? For the sake of this exercise, I'll click yes. There we go. I will now click cast your vote, and the results are, out of 86,075 votes, 26% say yes and 74% say no. The story goes on to say the government should consider updating the current, quote, yellow fever vaccination passport, end quote, issued to Australians who receive vaccinations before visiting high-risk countries. These could easily be turned into electronic vaccine cards and offered to each Australian. Well, Gee, if we could peer into the future, huh? If we could peer into the future, we don't know what it's going to be like when and if there's a viable vaccine with this sort of travel and passports. And do you get a green tick? Do you get a tattoo? Have you had the flu? Have you had the coronavirus vaccine? Yes, I have. Well, how do we know? It's in my passport. Ooh, not good enough. Show us your tattoo. I don't know. We just can't peer into the future. No, I don't think there are going to be tattoos. And finally, to wrap up this little COVID-19 vaccination, anti-vaccination segment, you would be aware after listening to the Skeptic Zone for the last little while of the Vaxxed bus and the work the Australian Skeptics did to counter this Vaxxed bus. The Vaxxed bus is no longer travelling at the moment. It plans to be. Again. And this notice has come to our attention. Vaxxed Down Under. We are excited to announce that the North Queensland Vaxxed Down Under tour will begin on the 10th of September. If you live in North or Central Queensland and want to meet up with the bus, please fill out the survey Monkey so we know where to find you and can plan accordingly. And it provides a link and also lists some of the proposed areas where this Vaxxed bus may be heading. So I'll read out the list published, and if you're in one of these areas or you know someone in one of these areas, you may wish to take advantage of the Australian Skeptics press release about this Vaxxed bus and the people behind it, who, to be blunt, think that coronavirus is a scam and not a real threat. So, people in Gympie, Hervey Bay, Bundaberg, Gladstone, Rockhampton, Mackay, Townsville, Cairns, Atherton, Greenvale, Charters Towers, Claremont, Emerald, Springshaw, Ralston, Roma, Miles, Chinchilla, and Dalby. Now, Queensland being such a huge state, that covers a very large area. If you know anybody in those areas or you are in those areas, you might want to take a look at the notice from Australian Skeptics. I'll add again the link in this week's show notes, or if you just Google Australian Skeptics and get to the Skeptics page, you'll find the information about the Vaxxed bus very easily. Well, there you are, a little bit of a winding road from the Bent Spoon Award to anti-vaccination. Throw in some conspiracy theories and some interesting issues we must all face soon. I hope we all have to face soon with the vaccine once it becomes available, and the Vaxxed or Vexed bus. And as ever, we'll try to keep you updated as best we can here on the Skeptic Zone.
I'm Mick West. In my podcast, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, I have extended conversations with people who have been involved in conspiracy culture. I do this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's really interesting. These people have great stories about how they fell down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, what they did down there, and what it was that helped them out. Sometimes I also talk to people who investigate conspiracy theories, and they have equally fascinating stories from the other side. Secondly, I want to understand how best to prevent the spread of conspiracy theories and misinformation, which is an increasing problem in a time when alternative media is exploding. The best way to do this is to communicate effectively with the people involved, and the best way to do that is with a nice long chat. So check it out, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, tftrh.com.
Let's have a random rant with Dr. Paulie.
The journal Psychological Science recently published a paper by Pennycook et al. Which sparked my skeptical interest. It was entitled, Fighting COVID-19 Misinformation on Social Media. Experimental Evidence for a Scalable Accuracy Nudge Intervention. Look, given the title, of course I felt obliged to read it. The authors conducted a relatively simple psychological experiment in 2 stages. They wanted to see whether a small nudge, reminding people to think about the accuracy of what they read, improved the likelihood of sharing true claims and decreased the likelihood of sharing false claims. The premise, they claim, is when we're casually browsing on social media websites such as Facebook and Twitter, we're more likely to be inattentive, and perhaps less likely to pay attention to things like accuracy. For those of us who have ever been on the internet ever, this will come as no surprise. In stage 1 of their experiment, they looked at baseline likelihood to share a set of true and false headlines, i.e. the headlines had true or false claims. They had people assess how accurate they thought the claim being made by the headlines were and whether or not they were likely to share it. And just to note that all the headlines had something to do with COVID-19. The researchers also assessed the participants regarding how concerned they were about COVID-19 in general and how often they checked the news regarding COVID-19. They also assessed them regarding their level of reflective thinking, whether they were the kind of person that goes to the doctor for every little thing or the kind of person that avoids the doctor altogether, their level of scientific knowledge, and their political ideology. And it's worth noting that this was based in the USA, so obviously the political ideology reflected the political parties there. The second experiment was pretty much the same, except they randomized patients to receive a nudge in order to think about the accuracy of a claim that didn't have anything to do with COVID-19 and to not receive a nudge. The authors conclude that the nudge made people more likely to consider the accuracy of the COVID-19 headlines before they shared it, and suggest that social media can easily implement this sort of thing in order to stimulate people into thinking about the accuracy of what they're sharing. Look, personally, I'm a little bit dubious that this will work in a sustained way, but that's not really what I wanted to focus on today. The researchers also looked at a number of correlations between those additional measures I mentioned earlier, i.e. whether or not they're likely to go to the doctor or their reflective thinking, and their ability to work out which headline has a true or false claim, and the likelihood they are then of sharing that true or false claim headline. I'm not going to focus on every little result presented because honestly I think they milk the data a little bit too much with lots and lots of correlations, but I think there are some things worth noting. Reflective thinking and science knowledge were positively correlated with spotting and sharing true claims and negatively correlated with sharing false claims. So what this is trying to say is that people who are reflective thinkers or have good science knowledge are more likely to spot a true claim and are also more likely to share them. And they're also more likely to spot a false claim and are less likely to share those false claims. Look, that's probably not that surprising. I mean, it makes sense that those who stop and think or have good science knowledge to back that themselves up are going to be more likely to spot the accuracy of a particular claim. However, what I found more interesting is that there's actually a stronger correlation between the reflective thinking and spotting and sharing true claims than there was with science knowledge. It seems to me that skeptics have been right along. Critical thinking is a better tool at deciphering true from false claims, more so than science knowledge alone. I wondered if we could focus more on this as an intervention, critical thinking, and how we could get the general public to have these attributes. I mean, that's what all of us would like the whole world to be, critical thinkers, right? I know we teach a lot of science content to kids at schools, and, look, not every kid likes science, but what I have heard is that there's not much critical thinking and that's missing from the curriculum. Luckily, my colleague at the Institute for Evidence-Based Healthcare at Bonn University, Professor Tammy Hoffman, is trying to solve this very problem. She's trying to teach high school kids how to evaluate claims and how to think critically. So, Tammy, I've been telling the Skeptic Zone listeners that you're currently running a study with high school kids, teaching them how to do critical thinking. What prompted you to start this project?
Well, two things. First of all, my background is in helping people to make informed health decisions. So when they're going to the doctor or working out whether a treatment is right for them and whether the benefits outweigh the harms. And the more research that we did with patients, we realised that there's this fundamental lack of critical thinking about health and assuming that everything a doctor says is correct and everything they read in health information on the internet is correct. And so we started thinking, how do we instill in people this sort of, I guess, skepticism, but critical thinking early on, so that people are, as they become adults, they're sort of already approaching everything with a, but why, or is that really true sort of frame. So at the same time, some colleagues in Norway and the UK were working on a project teaching primary school children to be able to just get the basics of thinking about whether a health claim might be true or not. And so in conjunction with Layla Cusack, who's my PhD student, so we're doing some work here in Australia thinking we were going to tackle high school students for the first time and start to just talk to them about so everything on the internet, everything on health products, everything on social media that makes a claim about health, that you actually need to stop and think, hang on, what's the research behind that claim and is it true?
Yeah, and that would be fantastic, especially if we could get a whole generation of skeptics out there and that it indoctrinated into the curriculum. I'm actually really surprised that this sort of thing isn't in the curriculum already. So you mentioned it has been done before in overseas in primary school kids. Is this not happening already?
Yeah, so we were surprised too. That was one of the things we looked at is we analysed the Australian curriculum, and a lot of teachers that we interviewed also said, no, that in terms of critical thinking, it's not really covered much in the curriculum, and a lot of teachers were hoping that, would be really wanting resources that would help them sort of package up how to teach critical thinking. So there's been a large randomised controlled trial done in Uganda of sort of a few thousand primary school children, it's grade 5, and they looked at could the teachers there over a whole semester teach them some basics about health claims and thinking about their accuracy, and that showed a significant effect. It was published in The Lancet a few years ago, and they've just released their 12-month follow-up results, and they retained that difference. So that's sort of the first big study. There's now quite a lot of studies around the world that are trying to translate those materials into their respective languages, and that's run by something called the Informed Health Choices Group based in Norway.
Cool.
But no one as of yet has done high school students.
Yeah.
And we thought that's the time when teenagers are really starting to have a say with, may not be, medical decisions, and, they're usually not on medications or having big health decisions, but they are getting lots of exposure to things like acne treatments and shampoo that makes your hair glossier and fuller, and sports drinks and athletic shoes and all of these products that are making health claims, and they're on social media and seeing Instagram and Facebook ads and Twitter ads promoting all this stuff using the claim language. So it's actually an ideal time, we think, to start teenagers just critically thinking, stopping and thinking, hang on, is this claim, is there research backing up this claim?
So, and Tammy, I'm really interested to know, and I guess everyone, listening to the podcast, keen to know, what is it that you're actually doing with the kids?
So what we've developed, so we did a few precursor studies, so some qualitative work with Australian teenagers and a systematic review of all the existing interventions, and confirmed that there are none in high schoolers, and we took some of the relevant bits from existing studies, and we've developed a 4-module course called Health Hack, and Health Hack obviously, but this is HACC, and it stands for How to Assess Claims Critically. So it's 4 modules. Each module's meant to be about the length of one classroom lesson, so about 50 minutes, and it's designed for teachers to teach it. So it's not a workshop that we're going to do. We did during the piloting, but in terms of dissemination and scalability, it's aimed at something the teachers can deliver. So there's a teacher's guide and all the PowerPoint slides and a teacher's manual. There's a student activity booklet, and it takes them through all the activities, hope to learn in hopefully what's a fun and engaging way, so that teenagers can sort of finish these 4 lessons and go, the next time I look at a claim on a product or on an ad or in a magazine, that they actually stop and think, is it for real? What's the research behind it? What type of research should I believe this? And it can be taught in any subject. We've aimed it at years 7 to 9, but most schools that are taking part seem to be situating it within the science curricula, but it could also go in, health and PE, or some schools have digital media, digital subjects, but it mostly seems to lend itself to sitting within the science curricula.
Great. And I'm sure we've got lots of listeners that are high school teachers that are listening in and wondering, oh gosh, how can I join this study? Is there any way that people can contact you if they're interested in joining?
Absolutely. Yep. So we've got ethical approval to do the study in any Australian high school, a private high school. We have approval to do it in Victorian state high schools. Paused for the moment while the COVID outbreak down there, but hopefully early next year we can resume that. But certainly right now we're actively recruiting for any high schools, independent high schools in Australia. And if you want to email me, it's thoffman, HOFFMANN @bond.edu.au. I can send all the details needed, and we provide all the resources needed, and help teachers to be able to deliver this. Some are delivering it sort of over 4 lessons in 1 week. Other schools are saying we're going to do it as a half-day activity at the end of term when all the assessment's finished and there's not much else to fill in the day. Rather than watching a movie or something, we'll do a half-day workshop on critical thinking, which we think is fantastic. So any schools that are interested, please get in touch.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tammy.
Thank you,
and good luck with it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Now I'd like to announce our new reporter, Jennifer Hathawn. Now, Jennifer I've known for many years, well, on and off. I originally met Jennifer at DragonCon over 10 years ago, and we sort of didn't really keep in touch because there was a big gap where I wasn't going to DragonCon. And when I went back to DragonCon just last year, there she was, and I did an interview with her on the spot, and her new segment is going to be called Here's My 2 Cents Worth. That will be coming up soon. Reports from Jennifer will be coming up soon, but just getting back to her bio. Jennifer is a skeptic and science enthusiast from the United States. Her lifelong passion for scientific knowledge led her to pursue a career in environmental science. She earned a master's in geography from Louisiana State University and a Bachelor of Science in Biology from University of South Alabama. And it goes on, her interest in skepticism blossomed along with her love of science, and she became involved with the Skeptics at DragonCon in 2007 as a fan. And I think Jennifer told me that she hasn't missed a DragonCon since. Welcome, Jennifer, to the show, and we look forward to your reports. And speaking of Jennifer, of course, you would have heard Jennifer earlier in the show during the solar flare moonshot segment. And a big thank you to Jennifer for providing her voice, and Brian Dunning and Ben Radford. What a crew. A big shout out to Maynard. I helped produce Maynard's live Mad Club show over the last few days. If you go to maynard.com.au, you can see that craziness. And before we go, a big thank you, as ever, to those wonderful people who help support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal at skepticzone.tv. Thank you, people. You can sit back and have an extra cup of tea, knowing that it's your contribution that means everybody else can enjoy the show. And if you're everybody else, maybe you can consider supporting the show as well. That would be much appreciated. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.